In working on the mallets, I needed to clean up the end of the head of the mallet, and it really wasn't getting nice enough on the disc sander. So what I wanted to make was a steady for the lathe so that I could hold the mallet at one end and work on the other end on the lathe. Now I had made a steady years ago on my first lathe, and I had made it way too spindly, as in the arms were much too long and just weren't stiff enough. And I realized in making that steady, it's not just about putting wheels next to your workpiece. The wheels have to be supported really well. So I wanted to come up with a steady that was much more stout, but also had a little bit of adjustability so that I could have varying sized mallets in the steady. So once I had a design fairly well worked out, I could cut out the pieces for it. So I found a piece of our old kitchen. I think that's what this plywood is from. It's a nice piece of fir plywood, so it's fir all the way through. And I found some points on the inside of the layout that allowed me to put nails through the plywood to hold it in place. I started with some tick marks on the arms that would help center the wheels. Then I cut out some dados for the arms to slide in. And I cut out the center holes. Then I could cut out the actual pieces. This is sped up quite a bit. Then I could free up the pieces from the table and clean up the edges. Now I made the arms just a little bit big for the slots that I cut for them. Then I could sand them down to size and get them to fit just perfectly so that they'd be snug but they'd still move freely. Now I've got a bolt for the wheels, and I need the head of the bolt to sit below the surface of the arm. That head's going to slide inside the slot of the body of the steady. Then I can clean up the main part of the steady. Now I needed to make a way to hold the steady to the bed of the lathe. These pieces could have been cut out on the CNC machine as well, but I hadn't really figured them out. Since they're mostly just rectangles, it's just about as easy to cut them on the table saw. So I cut a bottom plate that'll sit on the bed of the lathe. Then I cut two support pieces that'll go from that bottom plate to the main body of the steady and kind of hold it rigid in place. I could cut the angle on the bandsaw quickly and then clean up that cut on the disc sander and kind of shape that piece just a little bit. Then I can make a second one really easy from that. Now I needed to drill a bunch of holes to attach all of this support blocking to the main body of the steady. I'm just figuring out where the holes for the vertical blocking will go. And I can drill those. Now I can start putting it all together. So I clamped the bottom piece. So this is the piece that'll sit on the ways of the lathe. And I can attach that. Then I can attach the vertical blocking pieces, which will just get 2 screws on the bottom and then I think 3 screws along the side. So it's really pretty simple. Now I can sand the sides of that bottom piece flush with the body of the steady. And I can sand it fairly square and flush. Now it's ready for the arms. And I put the wheels in first thinking I had to at this point. But once I had it together, the wheels really could have gone on later. But doing it this way was fine. Then 2 bolts go in the slot in the arm, which will allow the arm to adjust in and out. and then those bolts go into the main body. Now I wanted one of these bolts that holds the arm to the body to be as close as possible to the bolt of the wheel, so there would be a minimum of flexing in the arm. Now I can put it on the lathe. Now to attach it to the ways, I just have a little rectangular piece that sits under the ways and clamps the whole system down to the lathe with a bolt. And it's really solid. So now I can put a mallet in place. I can chuck it from the handle end, and then I can hold the head in place. And it's actually stiff enough that I can turn the end. I found it was easier to sand off the major parts on the disc sander than just clean up the end on the lathe with the hand sander. Now I found the wheels were leaving a mark on the mallet, so I would put a piece of tape around the mallet to have the wheels run on. So this piece of tape had to be really flat, so no wrinkles and no bump at the seam. So in doing the seam, I can overlap the tape, cut a slice through the tape, and try and not mark the mallet. Then pull off one side of the tape, lift up that side, and pull off the tape that's underneath. Then roll the tape back on, and the seam should be perfectly flat and not make a bump for the wheels to go over. Then I can clean up the end. And that seemed to work really well. And once it was done, I could just pull the tape off. So I think with a steady on the lathe, one really needs to make them for specific uses. I don't think having a steady that tries to be all things really works well at any one of those things. Thanks for watching.